September of 98 to go north to a place called Gombe, and that is in the northeast, and to work with the Fulani people group. Now, the Fulani are, if you have a scale of people, way down here, that's what they're thought of. That's what people think about them. They're cattle herders roaming Nigeria, searching for food and water for their cattle, and that's what they do. But there are 15 million of them in Nigeria. 80% are those cattle herders. But there's another 20% or so that live in towns and villages. Government leaders, school teachers, some in the medical field, some working in the market, selling, some farmers. But most 95% illiterate. So there are challenges. How to reach them? A new missionary couple, Morris and Nancy Timkink, they were agriculturists too, but I joined the team as the evangelist, and we had another couple about an hour down the road, and he was in the medical field. And so we worked together as a team. And so we began to, during those first couple of years, 99 and 2000, before we went on furlough or stateside, we had to learn the language. And so we began learning the full day language. And so when we left in 2000 to go stateside, I was able to teach Bible stories in the language. I'd gotten to that ability. And so God, and that's a miracle because I am not a language person. Kim can tell you that. But came home, and then in 2001 we went back to Bombay. We had about 8 or 10 believers in Gombe. Just so happened that one of those was my language helper, and he could read, and he actually was a pastor of a different denomination. But when we went back, we joined Morris and Nancy again, and we began gathering that group together, and we began doing stories with them. And so the couple about an hour away, Blair and Becky Falk, Blair, I'm going to get Kim to hold it up here just briefly. And so if you know anything about Islam, we read from right to left, they read from left to right. So that's the way you read this thing. So it starts here with the first story, which is creation, goes down like that, comes back up, goes down like that, to the last story, which is the way of Jesus. So they're both Old Testament and New Testament stories on that. And so I will not go into any detail more than that. But we began teaching that group of believers those stories. And there were 3 or 4 of them that caught on really quickly and were able to do that. And so they began going out. We began sending them out to their village. They knew people, and they began sharing Christ. And so we began to see things progress, and we began to see some become believers. And so about 2003, we had a Wycliffe couple in Nigeria working on the New Testament. And so that's what this is, the Alcohol Kesal, which is the promise of God. And so they finished this about 2005, but these little jewels we used because this is on here, and it's solar operated. And so our leaders could take this with them, sit with a group of the full day language on it. It's got Bible stories. It's got tons. it's probably got 20 or 25 hours of different kinds of material on there that they could hear orally, which would lead them to Jesus. And so anyway, things began to progress from about 2003 to about 2011. We saw our one fellowship in Gombe Town grow to over 200 fellowships within our state and 3 states surrounding us. It's amazing. Fulanis they travel and they go places. And so we had like a 4-state area where we had over 200 fellowship plus fellowship. And so God did that. We did training. They went out. They did it. Now, I did go to several villages and start several storing groups in some villages. One of our night watch, who worked for us at night to watch the place, because we had a lot of robbers and stuff like that would come in and steal you blind. So he stayed up. That was his job, but he knew some of the stories. But we went to his village. He was actually employed the month before us, the month before we got there, and he had accepted Christ a couple of months before that. And so he had family. And so he had family. So we went to his village and we started this group there among his family and some of his friends in that village. And we saw his 2 brothers accept Christ. We saw his daughter accept Christ. We saw his mom and dad later accept Christ also. And so his family started coming to Christ. And so we just saw how, and we had several other villages we were going to too, but, and that was during the time where I could freely come and go. And I had no problem going anywhere. And in fact, when I'd go and greet chiefs were glad to see me and glad to hear me speak the language, and they welcomed me. It was not a problem at all. And so, but things changed. In 2000, around 2011, 2010, a terrorist group by the name of Boko Haram began to infiltrate into Nigeria. They had their camps along the Cameroon-Nigerian border up in the northeast. And they began to come in and burn churches and capture, go to schools and capture, hundreds of girls and take them back as their slaves, so to speak. And so they killed pastors. They did a lot of bad stuff. And so things began to get a little bit more dangerous. And so we had to be more careful. I had to be selective in where I went and make sure I had people with me because of that. Just kept getting closer and closer, and until it finally got to Gombe, and we had car bombings and suicide bombers coming and had those things happening in town where we were. So that was around 2010, 2011. But our leaders, our believers were faithful. They continued to share Christ, and no matter the danger, because they knew what they were serving. They knew what they had given up, because when a Fulani became a Christian, he lost. He may have lost his wife and his family. He may have lost his all of his possessions. If he had cows, he may have lost all of his cows. Everything was taken. So when he came to this testing period, it didn't bother him, they went no matter what because they knew that they were safe in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ would take care of them. They had that much faith. And so I'll back up just a little bit to around 2003 because I want to tell you about a man, and his name was Baba Yahya. Baba means father. Baba Yahya was a Muslim imam and very well educated. He had read through the whole Quran. He had also read through the Bible too. And through a missionary's effort back in the late 80s, we had the opportunity to meet him, and we did work with him in where he was from. He lost his wife, his possessions, lost everything he had. He was remarried, and he had a son, and then some things happened with his wife, and then so it was just he and his son. But he was faithful to share Christ. He could share Christ with an imam or with a beggar on the street. It didn't matter. He would go and share Christ. And so we built a relationship with him, went to some of his villages and in the early stages. And so we knew him. And so in 2011, right about there, we went home on stateside. And we planned on coming back that January 2012, I think it was, begin working with him in his area. Well, we had been back on the field about 2 weeks, and I got word from a pastor in town. He said, "You need to come to the hospital right now." And I went with him, and as I went with him, he said, "Baba Yahya has been killed." And so I had to go identify the body. And I went and identified the body. They had butchered him the way they do in the Islamic fashion. And he lost his life. That was a tough day to see that. But God used that in a very special way, which I will show you here in a little bit, how God used that. But evidently God thought it was his time to go. And in a cruel way, he went to be with Jesus. The way the story I heard was at that time he was staying at a pastor's house. He had a room at the pastor's house. The pastor had traveled, and this was early in the morning. Some young men came and got him and took him to everything's walled around there. You got walled compounds. So they took him to a walled compound that had no house, and they slaughtered him there. And I know beyond a shadow of doubt that God allowed it. It's not what we wanted, but God allowed it. I had the opportunity 2 weeks after we buried him. Yes, that's Bobby. And he was in his early 70s, and he was healthy and everything. But that's Bobby Yahya. That's Garba, the other man. That's Garba. That was our night watch that I was telling you about. But he like I said, he went everywhere sharing Christ. So about 2 weeks later, all of the Christian churches in Gombe State got together. They asked me to speak and asked several other pastors to speak about as a memorial to Baba Yahya. And I spoke that day from Matthew where it says, pray for your enemies, love your enemies and pray for them. And said, this is what he did and how he loved people, and he shared with Muslims no matter what. It cost him his life, but that's what Jesus did too. It cost Jesus his life, planned by God to save us. So God planned this to happen. and it led to the saving of many more. Because about a month after that, two men showed up at my house. One of them was in his 60s, the other one was in his 30s. One of them, his name was Emmanuel. He was the one, not Emmanuel, Muhammad. He was in his early 30s, and he brought this elderly fellow with him. And his name was, he was introduced as Dr. Ahmed, a doctor of mathematics, a very scholarly person who studied mathematics, and he got his doctorate degree in mathematics. And so Muhammad went to Garba's house and met with him. So I sat down with Muhammad. I mean, Dr. Ahmed. And Dr. Ahmed said, I want to share with you that Baba Yahya has been witnessing to me, and I have decided I want to follow the way of Christ, the way of Jesus. And I said, okay. And so we talked, and I shared with him the plan of salvation. We prayed, and he accepted in my presence the Lord as Savior. And that was I can't explain the joy that he had. He began to grow as a believer. I would meet with him once a week for about an hour or so and disciple him, and I did that for the rest of the year. And when 2013 came, or 2012 came. Yeah, we were in 2012. Yeah. So when the end of the year came, there was a Baptist layman by the name of Emmanuel. And Emmanuel, he had been working with a missionary, a journeyman missionary that was with us by the name of Paul Hughley, and they had developed a way to share Christ with Muslims. And they had been going together and doing that work. Well, Paul had to leave early because he and another lady who was a journeyman in Turkey, they earlier than he was supposed to. And in fact, they are missionaries with the IMB in Turkey right now and doing a marvelous work. They have fellowships growing and believers. It's just amazing to see what Paul and his wife are doing. And they have 3 kids now, and God's using them. But Emmanuel, I knew him, and so I introduced him to Dr. Ahmed, and we began to target an area to the west to the east of us, and it's called Borno State, and it was really a hotbed for Boko Haram, but they wanted to go. And Emmanuel had a motorcycle, and they would go once or twice a month, and they wanted to go. And Emmanuel had a motorcycle, and they would go once or twice a month, and they went, not Fulanis, but just Muslims, because there were, at that time, refugees everywhere. And so they won some Muslims to Christ and gathered them together. And over the next 6 to 8 months, they by their coming and going, they had about 6 fellowships going of believers. They also did some relief projects there, where because some of these people that they were winning had lost everything. Because Boko Haram didn't care whether you were a Muslim or a Christian. They just killed. And so many of these Muslims were without anything. So Baptist Global Relief, which is now Send Relief with the IMB, were able to send help to them in the form of food, stuffs, and blankets, and mats, and different things like that, medical helps. So through that Send Relief, we were able to do that. And that really helped. At the same time, we also, Emmanuel and I also, and Dr. Ahmed also did a larger relief effort in the state below us, Adamawa State, and they had a refugee camp there that had literally at least 1,000. Actually, there were 3 or 4 refugees. We had bought grain, bags of grain, and took grain, firewood, mats, blankets, Bibles. We did all of those kinds of things. A lot of these in that area were Christian. Some were Christians, but not all of them knew Christ. But there were some Muslim refugee camps too, which we also helped. And so that was something that came out of that ministry. And so you see how God took Bobby Yahia's life, but you see what he did through Dr. Ahmed and Emmanuel and their work, and you see how God just used that. I guess that same year, well, sometime in the summer, about twice a year, we would have Fulani together from all around and meet at our compound, and we would have weekends of discipleship. And so we'd do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well, during that one we had in the summer, I saw Muhammad, the one that brought Dr. Ahmed to us. I saw Muhammad. He came. And so during one of our breaks on Saturday, he came to me and took me and found Garba, and we went into Garba's room, and Muhammad said, I see what has happened with Dr. Ahmed. And Muhammad had an older brother. Had a younger brother who was one of our leaders. So he knew about the way of Christ. But he said, I'm ready to follow Christ. And so in Garba's room, we led him to Christ. And he was like Bobby Yahia, who was like Dr. Ahmed. He had a zeal. When he got free, when he accepted Christ, he got free. He wanted to go everywhere. And the neat thing about Muhammad, over the next couple of years, he and his wife, because he shared with his wife became a believer. So they a lot of times went together, plus fellowships of Fulani believers from that time until the time we left in 2015. They started at least 50 fellowships, and probably over 500 believers. And you're thinking, wow, all this started with Bobby Yahia. And so God does great things. It's him. During that time of 2011 to 2015, where I couldn't hardly go anywhere, just in the town, I couldn't go. They'd come, I'd train, they'd go out, more Fulanis. And the thing about Dr. Ahmed was he was not a Fulani, he was a Kanuri. Kanuris are probably the hardest to reach people group in all of Nigeria, because Kanuris do not accept Christ very quickly, but he did through Bobby Yahia and then through Ahmed. So you just see how all of this progression happened. So that's all God's glory, all to God. Nothing, all I did was teach. I probably won 5 people to Christ while I was there. But I was able to teach others who took it and won others. So I don't I can't take any glory for this. It's only God that can receive the glory for it. So that's the last thing that I remember. When Muhammad became a believer, his one of his younger brothers named Usman, he was already one of our leaders, but he had two more of his brothers accept Christ. And of course, his mom had accepted Christ earlier when his younger brother did. And so that's how God works. But he had requests. He said, I may never see you again, but please pray for my father that he will come to Christ. And I don't know to this day if his father has ever come to Christ. I have no idea. But still praying for him that he will. I just want to mention some of our other leaders. Garba, the man that was sitting next to Bobby Ahai. In one of these other pictures with a group of Fulanis, there was a man by the name of Edie, and he was one of our leaders, and he passed away also in 2018. And then there's was a couple of other of our younger leaders that were caught in a bombing that happened, and they were killed in a bombing. So, some have died since we've been there. So, Usman, Muhammad's younger brother, he showed up on our doorstep. God led him to us. You see, they lose it all, but when they accept Christ, even though they lose it, they gain it. They gain everything. Ishaku was a young man that accepted Christ through Garba's ministry. And when he accepted Christ, his family took him and they locked him in a room and wouldn't feed him, wouldn't give him anything to drink, tried to get him to recant his belief in Jesus Christ. He refused. And he's one of my closest brothers that I worked with. He could tell every one of those stories on that scarf. Boom, 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 boom. He just knew them that well. Didn't read a lick. But he had faith in Christ and he shared Christ. He came to Christ not at first when he came, he was a gardener at a compound just down the road from where we stayed, and he heard from Garba about this Jesus, so he began coming to our compound, and I showed him in a dream, and he saw a bright light and a man dressed in white. And he said he knew as soon as he saw that dream that was Jesus. And the next day he came and he said, I gotta accept Christ. And he did. So he was one of our leaders too. And he's still doing the work with Muhammad and some of the other younger leaders there in Gombe. Just why did we leave? Well, in 2015, in February, on what's the holiday in February? Valentine's Day. Yeah, Valentine's morning. Went about our usual routine Saturday morning with breakfast, and all of a sudden we started hearing gunfire. And like I said, Boko Haram had started coming close, and we started hearing gunfire. And so I saw a policeman out on the road in front of our house. So I went out and talked to him. I said, what's going on? He said, sir, go back in your house. Everything will be okay. Just go back in your house. We got this under control. For the next 3 hours, just almost constant gunfire. And it kept getting closer. And we could tell it was getting closer. In fact, I went in, we prayed, and God just gave us a peace like He has never given us before. And we were working a jigsaw puzzle, and but we were on this gunfire. And around 10 to 11 o'clock, we started hearing planes fly over and bombs explode. And but peace was still there. And about 12 o'clock, gunfire stopped. And they had driven them back out of town. And we prayed about it. Nope, we got to stay. We can't go. Just because they've entered our town and tried to take it, no, we got to stay. There's work left to do. And so over the next month, other incidents happened. And then all of a sudden, Kim and I woke up one morning and we both felt that it was time to leave. It's like God said, it's time. At the end of April for our assignment anyway, but He spoke clearly to both of us. And we packed up that week and planned on coming back. Knew that we might not be able to come back to Gombe, but we planned on coming back. And that was our plan. And so we packed up, we moved to Jos and stayed there for about a month till it was time for us to go on our stateside, and we went on our stateside and fully intended to go back. And August of that year, David Platt, the IMB president, issued because of financial constraints, he issued what was called the voluntary VRI, Voluntary Retirement Initiative or something like that. So we thought, oh, no. And we prayed, and was it in October? I think it was in October. We went up to the mountains, in Georgia mountains, and we were up there at one place, and God just clearly spoke to us. It's time to leave. That's just what He did. And that was harder than accepting the call to the mission field. It was literally harder to do that. We had no idea what we would do. I was 60 years old. I was still way out from retirement. What am I going to do? I don't know. But our life verse has always been, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding in all your ways. What He did, He called us away. Was it easy? No, it was not easy at all. I went back in the early December to close up the house and to meet with the believers for the last time. I've not been back yet. I don't know if I'll ever go back. I'd like to, but we closed out our ministry with the believers, and I was there for about 4 days, and we had a service. I think it was on a Sunday, and I preached on that Sunday from the passage in Acts where Paul is saying goodbye to, I think it's the Ephesians. And it was difficult. Lots of tears shed, and Philani's don't share tears, but we had tears. And God blessed. And so we left. So what does the future hold? We have been in contact with Emmanuel and Mohammed and some of the others, and things are still going forward. Discipleships trips are still being made. Believers are still being made. The work is going well. When we left in 2015, there were 300 plus fellowships and over 3,000 Philani believers. Started from that one group that Morris and I began to disciple back in 2000. part of that. But so all God's doing. Like I said, I probably won maybe 5 people to Christ while I was there, but they did it because God just came over them and gave them a desire. They gave them freedom from the way of Islam says this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But when they accepted Christ, it was not about doing, it was about that relationship. And they had a freeing relationship with Jesus Christ. And it gave them, even though they lost everything, it gave them the desire to win their people for Christ. And so, what's plans for the future? And amongst all the Baptist churches we have here in South Carolina, you're one of the fellowships. And so what can you do? Well, you can pray. How can you pray? Pray for the believers that are under persecution, because they do go through a lot of persecution. Pray for the displaced people groups in Nigeria, because there's a lot of people still displaced because of Boko Haram. Boko Haram is still active and still working their evil, but pray for them. One thing I didn't mention was the widows ministry, which is going on. A lot of times when a believer becomes a believer, sometimes he's killed and you're left with widows. And what do? How do they take care of their children? Well, we started a program, and once again, Send Relief helps with this kind of thing, to provide funds for widows ministry, providing them maybe with a sewing machine to sew, or with the things they need to get started in a business in the market to sell food, to cook food and to make food, those kinds of things. And we are still doing that today. And that's something that you can be involved in, because when you give to Send Relief, that helps that widow's ministry. These displaced Muslims and Christians that I'm telling you about, that's also a way that Send Relief can help. You can give money through Send Relief. And I think you saw some of the pictures there of the refugee groups and the grain and the Bibles and different blankets that were given away and stuff to help these people. And so those things are still happening today. You can pray for the Fulani leaders who go out and do the work, because they need your prayers. They face danger from every side, because you remember I said they are like on the low part of the totem pole. Well, many Christians don't understand that Fulanis can accept Christ. They just don't believe it. How can they? When we first went to Gombe, one of the pastors of one of the churches said to us, Fulanis can't become Christians. There's no way. But they can, because they're human. God made them. And so pray for Fulani leaders, because they not only suffer persecution from Muslims, but they suffer persecution from Christians too. And so that's how you can help, by praying and by sending. And so that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. And just thank you for letting me share. That's what I came to share. I pray that God will speak to you